Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next installment of the Teacher to Teacher webinar series put on by Mountain Bosies. Tonight we have Ryan, and Ryan, I hope I'm not going to mispronounce your last name, Fidelity. Ryan is an 11-year veteran of public education. He spent his first 8 years in education in the classroom, teaching upper elementary at Cactus Valley Elementary in Silk, Colorado. The past 3 years, he's been an instructional coach at Graham Mesa Elementary, delivering classroom management professional development. He uses a combination of works of Chris Biffle, Michael Linson, Jim Fay, and Spence Rogers to help teachers manage their classrooms. Ryan, take it away, and let me unmute.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? Will you guys type yes in the chat pod if you can hear me as well? Okay, rock on. Welcome to, this is actually a series of classroom management tools that y'all can use. I'm assuming many of us are probably new teachers or in our first couple of years of teaching. So this is kind of like the first step that you would need to gain control of your classroom. So like Will said, my name is Ryan Fiddledie. I'm originally from Grand Rapids, Minnesota, so about 2.5 hours south of the Canadian border, way up there. I have felt 60 below zero before. I graduated from the University of Minnesota Duluth. This is my 12th year out here on the Western Slope. Right now I'm the coach at Graham Mesa Elementary School, and I've been here for 4 years, and I was in the classroom for 8 years before that. And some of the roles I have in the classroom, if you're not sure what a coach is, my main role is to support teacher effectiveness, coaching in the classroom, doing observations, team teaching, things like that. I also wear a lot of hats. We don't have an assistant principal here, so I'll do a lot of roles like that, supporting student discipline. I'm also the school's assessment coordinator, RTI case manager, a whole bunch of things in that role as well. And then also as part of being the coach, I also do professional development for the whole staff. And a big focus for our staff for the past 3 years has been classroom management. So I have done a lot of presentations on classroom management, and I'm certainly not an expert, and I didn't make any of these things up. It all comes from a lot of research. But with all that being said, this is my first webinar, so I will try not to overtalk you guys. I know you're sitting at home, hopefully eating dinner or having a drink or something like that, and hopefully we can get through this and make it valuable for you. And then also right now I'm participating in grad school at the University of Texas at Arlington. It's a full online program for educational leadership and policy. So that's a little bit about me. Why don't you share who's in the room right now? So in the chat pod, if you guys wouldn't mind sharing your name, where and what you teach, and your years of experience in the classroom so far. So I'll give you guys a moment to do that. Awesome. Thanks, Annie. Hi, Juan. Thanks, Carrie, Carol, Mattia, Tina. Hi, Chelsea. Hey, Ryan, Jill. Hi, Allie. Cool. Looks like that's about everybody. Thanks for introducing yourselves to everybody. Looks like we have some new teachers and some teachers with some classroom experience. So I feel like this should be valuable for all ranges. So I hope I made something that can be useful to you. I did make a note catcher for you guys. and Will, you can help me out with this if I'm not saying it correctly, but down in the kind of bottom left-hand corner, I'm not sure what that box is called, there's a note catcher that you guys can put onto your computer that you can take notes with. Will, I don't know if you can open that up so that people can see what it looks like on the screen. Beautiful, there you go. And then what you would do, this is kind of my note catcher, guys. So what you would do is go up to File and then make a copy, and then just name your copy whatever you want, and it'll save for you, and then you can have that. If you type into this specific one here, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Google Drive or Google Docs. If you type into this one, then it'll start typing into my master copy, which wouldn't be the biggest deal in the world, but you probably want something that's yours. So you guys can kind of bring this up simultaneously so you can take some notes. These are kind of the big ideas we'll cover today, but feel free to type anything you want in these boxes, and I just kind of put a summary of each little part in here as well. So Will, to get rid of that, can I just X out the tab? Is that okay?
Yeah, actually you're looking at your...
Oh, well then yeah, there we go. So I'll give you guys just a moment to do that. In about 1 minute, we'll start the presentation. And then Chelsea, if you can hear me, this is a similar presentation that we did at RE2 for induction. There are some new different parts and things like that, so I think you'll still find it useful with some of the videos that I put in there. So I'll give you guys about 30 more seconds to get that stuff ready for those of you that like to take notes. Okay, I think we're about ready to get started here. Okay, so conditions for learning tonight. You can make this as valuable or as useless as you want, or not as you want, but as you can, as you choose. Excuse me. So two conditions for learning tonight are just choose to be present, try to stay with the presentation. I know it's easy to get distracted on a webinar, and then choose to participate. So feel free to use that chat pod to ask any questions, to share any thoughts. If you'd like to challenge any ideas, that's fine too. But I can't tell what you're thinking without you typing into the chat pod. So that doesn't require you to do anything, but it's helpful in the learning process. And then by the end of today, you should be able to explain exactly what a classroom management plan is and describe why it's important to teaching. Okay, so we have a video to kind of keep it light. So this is probably not what you want to do for classroom management. This comes from the movie South Park, or the show.
This treatment is fast and effective and doesn't use harmful drugs. Watch closely as I apply treatment to the first charge. Sit down and study! Sit down and study! Stop crying and do your schoolwork! If you would like more information on my bulletproof treatments, please send away for this free brochure entitled, "You Can Either Calm Down or I Can Pop You in the Mouth Again." Thank you.
Okay, Will, can you get us back to the presentation? Okay, so hopefully that was just for fun. Hopefully it wasn't disturbing to anybody, but that was just one way, one philosophy with classroom management that I guess we could call that old school. It's kind of funny when I was in grade school. I remember my third grade teacher used to have a goalie stick, a hockey goalie stick, mounted on the back wall, and I always threatened to use that if we misbehaved. I mean, he never actually took it down or anything like that, or actually like made it look like he was about to hit anybody, but he always had that as something to look at to try to motivate us to behave. So that's kind of not what we're doing tonight. We're going to do a lot of the opposite of that, because that's obviously something that's not going to allow you to continue to teach or stay out of jail. So let's take a look at what this is, okay? So this is what I did is I've read a lot of different books on classroom management, and I'll synthesize the information, summarize it so that it's usable for teachers immediately. So these, if you're a book person, the two best books that you could probably read on classroom management, the first two that you see there, The Classroom Management Secret and Dream Class. Those are both written by Michael Linson, and we're actually going to look at a classroom management blog at the end of this webinar. He's probably the best classroom management person to go to as far as reading goes. So if you're a reading person, I would highly recommend getting those two books. They're short, they're easy to digest, and there's things that you can use the next day. And a lot of my stuff in my presentations the next 3 weeks comes from him. Conscious Classroom Management by Rick Smith has some good ideas as well. It's a little bit more difficult of a read, but it's got some good stuff in there. Teaching for Excellence is a huge book by Spence Rogers. It's not necessarily on classroom management, more on engagement techniques, but there's some good stuff in there as well. And then a lot of people are familiar with Chris Biffle. He does whole brain teaching. If you signal your class where you do the class, and they say yes, 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 or something like that, that comes from whole brain teaching with Chris Biffle. So some ideas come from Chris as well. So what this isn't, these aren't all the wonderful things that I did as a classroom teacher. I don't necessarily believe everything from these books is exactly how things should be run for Facilitate. And what I mean by that, there's a variety of ways to manage a classroom, and so long as you can get the kids to do what you want them to do in the way you want them to do it and be kind, it's probably a right way. And I don't think your classroom management stinks, okay? So if you're in this webinar, it's not because your management stinks. You're going to pick up some tips that you can use along the way. So what that also means is feel free to question anything, disagree with, challenging the ideas. You won't hurt my feelings at all. None of them are original ideas from me. Like I said, I just do the synthesizing of information and put it back out there for staff members or people seeking professional development, so they don't have to actually read a full book that takes several evenings or weeks to read, when I can summarize information and just get it out to you so you don't have to do that. So feel free to challenge if you need to. Okay, so just reflect. You can type this in your Google Doc, you can write a note or whatever. What is your classroom management plan right now? If anybody chooses to participate in the chat pod, you could type a few things about how do you manage your classroom right now? Do you have a set of rules? What do you do when you respond when kids break those rules? Just anything about classroom management in the chat pod would be good for people to see as we choose to participate. So I'll let you guys reflect. You can take some notes. Let's take about 2 minutes to do this, and at 7:15, I'll start the presentation back up again. Oh, thanks, Jill. I see you use a clip chart. That's definitely a very common and effective way to manage behavior. Thanks, Carrie. It looks like that you use technique of engaging the kids, finding engaging ways. If they're engaged enough, then they won't misbehave. It's the way I'm kind of reading that. Thanks, Carol. Kind of projecting into the future so that they can make a better choice. Okay, thanks, Juan. I see a lot of people are still typing, so I'll give a few more minutes to kind of finish typing before I start talking again, okay? Thanks, Chelsea. I see Class Dojo. We use some Dojo with specific students, not with whole classes here, but it's really effective. Definitely gives a lot of feedback to kids. Awesome, Allie. Thank you. Don't even have to use your voice, just using hand signals. Nonverbals are typically more effective than verbals. All right, thanks, Ryan. It looks like you use reminders and using as coaching moments for students. Yeah, Chelsea, Dojo does have the parent communication piece since it's all done for, digitally. That's pretty cool. Parents can just check in and see how all of their kids are doing at any moment in time. Okay, great. That looks like everybody's kind of that's going to participate is, oh, I see Rachel's here too. Social contracts, cool. Yep, certainly developing some valued purpose for those students on how they are going to treat others and their teacher. Very cool. Thank you. Okay, so I noticed some parts of things that people already do that may be a part of what I present here, but I think there'll be a lot of new things for you. So check it out. And the cool news about classroom management is it's never too late to restart. Like if you ever feel like that you're losing control of your classroom and each day is a struggle and you come home kind of pulling your hair out, so to speak, the next day is always a good day to restart. So hopefully I can give you some ideas that if you're feeling like that at all, you can restart, or you can just start incorporating with what already works for you. The first part about classroom management, as far as someone in my position where I get to observe a lot, is classroom management almost always first falls apart at signaling. If you are weak at signaling, basically getting So Kylie did a couple, so you couldn't hear the music very well. It was actually playing, but my phone didn't catch it when I was recording. But you would have, if you could hear the music, you would notice her turning it up loud right before she pauses it, and then she gave the visual signal, and then she just waited for all kids to be at her attention. You notice not every single kid raised their hand. That's fine. Like, you don't need to die on that hill. Not every kid needs to raise their hand, but every single student does need to be quiet and facing her. So that's how AVPP works. Like I said, you can choose the audible, you can choose the visual. Just make sure you pause before you proceed. And the second part of signaling is launch buttons. So this helps eliminate those times when kids are predicting what you're about to say, and before you get out all of your instructions, they start doing it. And a lot of times kids are already moving before you want them to, or before you've been able to complete all the things you wanted to say to them. So launch buttons are something that keeps you in control. This comes from Spence Rogers out of Teaching for Excellence. So you would give an instruction, but you'd give a launch button. You would tell the kids when they're allowed to go. So you will say something like, when I say go, I want everybody to go get a pencil. Go. And that starts eliminating kids from moving before you want them to. You also can say, like, when you hear music, I want everybody to push in their chairs, go get a pencil, and meet me on the carpet. And then you'd press play and music would play, and then that's their signal to go. So it kind of keeps you in control all the way through. If you notice kids are still jumping the gun a little bit, eliminate the actual launch button in the phrasing. So you would say something like, in a moment, I would like everybody to push their chairs in, go get a pencil, and meet me on the carpet. Go. and then you have your launch button there. So sometimes when you actually say the launch button in the phrasing, they'll still jump the gun, but that should eliminate a lot of times once you get strong at it, of kids moving before you actually are stopped with your instruction. Okay. So here's a good example of a launch button in action. It's Kylie again, and she's going to control the room and telling them when they need to go. So they're making some twirly birds. So let's see how Kylie does.
When you hear music, you are going to fold the top one way, and the other top one another way, so that it makes a T.
Okay, so you notice she used the phrase "when you hear music," so that means the kids are pausing until she's done with their instructions. She took a pause just to even press play, and once she pressed play, then the kids were going. A lot of times if you didn't do that phrasing before and provide the kids with the launch button, they would start doing the folding before you would even finish your instructions. So that's the purpose of launch buttons. They're really effective and they're easy to put in. You could put those into play tomorrow if you'd never even heard of those before. Okay, so how do you get your students' attention right now? So in the chat pod, take a moment. You can either answer this question, how you get your students' attention, or you can make a comment on the videos you saw, and please include any questions or anything that you're wondering. I'm actually going to play music from here. I'm going to try to keep it low, but hopefully you guys can hear it. And then that way I have a signal for you when we're coming back. Plus it won't be that weird, like awkward silence. Like sometimes in webinars, I feel like my computer froze or something like that. So let me play music from here. And then while the music's playing, why don't you guys type in the chat pod of how you get your students' attention right now. So. Cool. I see a countdown, Mattia. Thank you. Is that better, Will? Chimes and countdowns, very cool. I know some people use a doorbell chime, electric doorbell chime. Those work really well. If you can hear me, clap once. Very cool. So you have audible and visual signals in there. Thanks, Carrie. Music, very cool. Thanks, Annie. Okay, Rye, looks like you have a audible signal. Nino bells, I haven't seen those before. Thanks, Carol. Awesome, thanks, Rachel. Looks like you have audible as well. Pausing is key. Thank you. Awesome, thanks, Chelsea. Audible, visual, very cool. Allie, thank you. Looks like you guys have kind of a version of class with the Uno Dos Tres. Thanks, Juan. So we have audible as well. Yeah, thanks, Julie. Yeah, small classes are definitely a little easier to get attention of, and sometimes you only need to say a word, and it's easy to have them come back. Awesome. So that'll be my webinar signal. Music up. I'm ready to continue on, and music off. I'll start talking. So yeah, it looks like you guys have some great signals already. Hopefully they're effective for you. If anytime they fall apart, go back to that AVP procedure. Like if you're missing an audible or a visual part, add that part in and see how it goes. But so long as you're doing your signal and you're pausing, most of the time that should be enough. Okay, let's move on. Classroom management plan. So this is a really common interview question, is that when you're in an interview room, you'll be asked what your classroom management plan is. And it's a really simple definition. It's only two things. What are your rules and expectations, and what happens when those rules and expectations are broken? That's it. So if you ever have another interview later on in your career and you get asked that question, just break it down to the two simple things: rules and expectations and consequences, and then you can expand upon that. They should always be clearly visible in the room. That's for the kids and for you. So you are always anchored to those rules. If you're an elementary or middle school teacher, they should be fewer than six or fewer. The less that you can have, the better, but they need to cover a lot of stuff, okay? Because kids will find loopholes. And I'll give you some examples of some rules that work for 6 or fewer. High school, middle school, later middle school, high school, you can have more than 6. It seems to work pretty well. But the high schools in our district still kind of stick by the rule of 5 or 6. Like you should have only that many rules. Otherwise, it's too hard to remember. I can't remember all my 14 rules and which one you broke for a first student. So it makes it hard for me to coach them through that. So some rule expectations here. Here's the ones we use at Grand Mesa. This comes from Chris Biffle, Whole Brain Teaching. Rule 1 is follow directions quickly. Rule 2, raise your hand for permission to speak. Rule 3, raise your hand for permission to leave your seat. Rule 4, make smart choices. And Rule 5, keep your dear teacher happy. So you can see 1 through 3 are fairly specific. Rule 4 and 5 covers everything else. So if you're not sure which rule they probably broke Rule 4 or 5, and then you can coach the kids through that. So hey, little Johnny, you broke Rule 4 for poking your partner in the pencil, and then you would go on from that, whatever your set of consequences is. So this is less than 6, fewer than 6, and it covers every single thing, okay? So another example of this one is only 4. So listen and follow directions. Raise your hand before speaking or leaving your seat. Respect your classmates and your teacher. Keep hands, feet, and objects to yourself. So Rule 3 in this one kind of covers it all, right? And the Rule 1, 2, and 4 are a little bit more specific. So this comes from Michael Linson's Classroom Management Secret as another great example. Sorry, this is my phone. Also, this is a high school example, high school PE class. So you can see there's 14 rules. This would be acceptable, or a later middle school one. But I would still I wanted to make it known that you can have more than 6 rules. And here's what that would look like. But it's not like an unacceptable thing to have 14. It just makes it harder to enforce. Okay. Okay, so rules and consequences. So classroom management plan. So consequences for breaking our 5 rules are the first 5 that you see up top here. So obviously most kids will give a redirection to get them to stop the behavior. If they don't stop the behavior, if they continue with a different misbehavior, then we would move to a formal warning. And that's usually just a verbal warning. And then if that doesn't correct the behavior, then they'll be asked to go to timeout. A lot of teachers call that refocus. So sometimes timeout, the word timeout has negative connotations. Refocus has a little bit more positive. So sometimes it's called timeout or refocus or sit out. If that still doesn't correct the behavior, then there's always communication home with the parent, and you let the student know that. And if that doesn't correct the behavior, we're already down to number 5. That's a pretty big deal, and usually it'll be referred to the office. Okay, but don't go to office referral unless you know your schools, what they're comfortable with their management plan. And then middle and high school, kind of the same thing: redirection, a warning, communication home, and then you just refer to whatever. Awesome, thanks, Chelsea. Think it through sheet. getting along together. Love it. Okay, let's move along here. Tina, awesome. Looks like you even got it down to 3 rules. Nice. I got a bunch more stuff here, but I want to keep you guys on time too. So, okay, so that's the part of like the nuts and bolts of classroom management. Your signaling, audible, visual, pause, proceed. Your launch buttons. Kids move when you want them to move, and they do things under your control or your influence. And then the classroom management plan is what are your rules and consequences and what happens if they're broken. And with rules and consequences, I always use the officiating analogy. I officiate high school basketball and high school football, and I have a certain rule book that I have to follow. I don't just make things up for each time that's something on the court or on the field happens that goes wrong. I have rules that I have to follow, and I just simply enforce. So I don't have to make anything up. The hardest part, the teachers that are new or that struggle with classroom management may lack that consistency where they're picking a different consequence each time that a misbehavior happens, and that's exhausting. So if you have something to go to every time that a misbehavior happens and you're consistent with it and the kids know it well, you should have no problem. You're just like an official. You're just out there calling the fouls. Just call the fouls, okay? And that kind of takes us to this next slide. So part of managing a classroom is stressful. Like it causes a lot of stress, and it causes teachers to kind of leave the business because they're not sure of how to get kids on track. Okay, so if you're feeling stressed at the end of the day, usually you always go back to classroom management, because if you're working with that dream class, that class that does everything that you want them to do when you want them to do it, and you've got a community of kind, empathetic, and cooperative learners, usually those teachers go home pretty satisfied. So some ideas around classroom management that helps relieve stress. The first bullet point is take emotion out of giving consequences. And so what that means is you don't have to raise your voice, you don't have to yell, you don't have to scream, you don't have to let your blood pressure raise at all when giving consequences. You're just simply calling the foul and moving along, and let the kids self-reflect themselves on where they went wrong, okay? The second bullet says, think about how you feel when you're lecturing or scolding somebody, and how would you feel just by assigning a consequence and then moving on, okay? So lecturing and scolding is usually harms relationships. The kids may deserve a lecture or a scolding, but then it goes back to you on how stressful it is, and we want to start to eliminate some of the stressors of teaching. So then the third bullet says, just let your management plan do all the work for you. You guys have your rules, you have your consequences, stick right to them and let that do the work. Let your consequences do the work. You don't have to do the lecturing or scolding or talking to. You certainly want to coach and teach, but coaching and teaching feels a lot different than lecturing and scolding. Teachers, we set the bar unrealistically high. So sometimes teachers set the bar at perfection. So a good example of that is my wife teaches 4th grade, and she came home a couple weeks ago, kind of head in her hands, kind of muttering to herself like, oh my gosh, what a day. And I asked her about her day, and she said that that there was one situation with a student that had gotten to timeout, still misbehaved, and she had to go with an office referral. I said, okay, how was the rest of your day? And she said it was great. Kids were great the rest of the day. So I said, only about 5 minutes of your day, 10 minutes of your day wasn't so great? And she's like, yeah. So I said, so the other 7.5 hours was pretty good? Yeah. So then why do we feel so stressed? It's because she's always reaching for that perfection. So let go of perfection and understand that students are going to misbehave. It's a part of being adolescent and growing up. We want those perfect classes, but don't hold on to that, okay? You want to shoot for that, but don't hold on to it if you don't reach it, okay? So let go of that stress. And then take 5 minutes a day, the last bullet point, and visualize yourself giving a consequence. This is a sports technique. A lot of Olympians do this, where they visualize how they're going to perform that day. Same thing with teachers. Before that first bell rings, visualize yourself visualize yourself working with your toughest, hardest student, the one that gets your blood boiling the most, that frustrates you the most, and just visualize on that student misbehaving that day and visualize on how you're going to handle it calmly. And most of the time, if you visualize that and take the time to do it, you'll do it in the way that you visualized. So give that a try, and taking the time, like, okay, this kid gets under my skin every single day. Here's what he does. Okay, here's how I'm going to handle it. Okay, now I feel better how I'm going to handle it, and normally you will do it that way that you visualized it. Some more strategies. Saying no and holding your ground. Like, remember, you're the boss, so you get to say no, and you want to avoid arguing over explaining. So if a student tries to argue with you, you say, no, I understand, but the answer is no. And then just walk away, okay? And then if they try to get in a power struggle, just refuse to get in an argument with students. If you have that student that, the second bullet says, put the onus on the kid to come back to you when they make a request. So if you have that student that's constantly asking you, like, to go to the bathroom or to do this or that, have them do something first. So yes, Joseph, you can use the bathroom, but after you do these first 3 problems, then raise your hand and I'll consider letting you go to the bathroom, especially if you feel like it's something where kids are just doing it to avoid a task. So make them do something before they can go, and then you actually get some work output out of them as well. Do away with reminders. Reminders are part of our classroom management process. What that means is just do away with reminder after reminder after reminder. Give them their one reminder if that's part of, or a redirection if that's part of your consequence plan. And then the next part is a warning. They'll start to get the message that you won't just keep giving them chances, okay? And you do it calmly. Remember, you don't have to be mean about it. Just do it calmly. They just don't need that many reminders. And the best time to show consistency and prove you're serious about classroom management is when you have to consequence your best kids. The kids that you know that if you give them 2 or 3 reminders, they'll start to correct the behavior. Some of your best kids, I'm not saying target your best kids or seek out giving them consequence, but when they misbehave, like they blurt excitedly or they're out of their seat when they're not supposed to, instead of constantly giving them extra chances because you know that they'll be able to correct the behavior on their own, get to warning. Give them that warning. A lot of times those kids won't get past the formal warning. If they have to get to timeout, I guarantee you they'll be horrified and they'll never be in timeout again. And that also is a signal to the kids that misbehave all the time that you're serious about this, that you're not just targeting them, that it's the same for everybody. That's the idea, is that all your consequences and rules are the same for everybody, not just for the kids that have a hard time correcting their behavior. Awesome. Thanks, Chelsea. Yep. Yeah, if you even just want to get rid of reminders entirely and get to verbal warning, that works too. Some of the best classroom managers I've seen didn't even do reminders because the kids should have been if you're good at modeling your rules and consequences, the kids should be crystal clear on what's expected of them. One last page of just strategies, and that's kind of what I was talking about with what Chelsea just typed. Practice, practice, practice. Show these kids how your rules work and how the consequences work. So role play that. Kids love to when you give them license to misbehave, so you can show them how you would run through your consequences. So choose a student to misbehave, to blurt, to poke somebody, to be out of their seat while you're teaching, and then show them how you would talk to them in front of the class with a redirect, show them how you would give them a warning, show the whole class how you would ask somebody to go to timeout, show the whole class how you would communicate with the parent so they know exactly what will happen if they misbehave. There shouldn't be any question of what happens, and they can't argue with that either if they know exactly what you will do if they misbehave in these certain ways. Role play that as much as you possibly can, and the clearer they are, the less misbehavior you should have. You can also, the second bullet point, script and practice the first 10 minutes of class and how students enter and leave class, and do it exactly the same every single day. I had a pretty rough reading class of a couple years ago, and one of the best things I did was before they came in, we had a process of where they lined up in the hallway. I counted down, gave a signal. They had to be silent. We had to enter the room silent. I had the work out for them, ready to go. And they knew that as soon as they came in the room, they're not allowed to speak. They come in, start working on whatever practice I had them do. And it was for only like 2 or 3 minutes. And then I would stop, the timer would ring. I'd stop them, then I would greet them pleasantly, and we'd go on with our class. But we entered class the same way every single time. That made a big difference to set them up for learning for the day. And the same thing at the ending of class. Every layer of structure that you can add for them makes a big difference. So if kids leave and they get a little crazy as they leave, make a structure for them so that they leave the same way every single day. And then the structure should be something where they're behaving. Observe more, that means step back and just watch your kids as they practice independently. So you don't need to necessarily float and look over the shoulders of kids the entire time that they're practicing. Step back and pause and just watch from one spot in the room where you can see everybody. And you'll be amazed on how much you can see, on how much learned helplessness goes away, because they know that you're not going to just jump in and help them the second that they start practicing. And you'll also notice a lot of kids like looking up at you to see if you're looking. And it's a really calm way to observe a class. Now, eventually you want to go see if the kids are doing what you asked them correctly. So then you're going to want to kind of move about the room. But you don't have to just do laps throughout the room the entire time. Just stop in one place and observe the whole class. And then the last bullet point speaks to if there's a situation where a student's escalated, and giving them a consequence at that time is just going to, cause a tantrum, which can happen a lot in elementary school. Kind of let the misbehavior play out. Make sure everybody's safe. You don't want to make any other kids unsafe, but then give the consequence later after they've calmed down. So, and it can always be even the next day. Hey, buddy, remember what happened at the end of the day yesterday at about 2 o'clock when you pushed that chair into another student and then you started yelling at me because I asked you to move to another table? That's not how we really behave here. So I'm going to have to ask you to just go right to timeout today to think about that, or do a think it through sheet, or whatever your consequence system is, and do it later on. Okay, so you can always give consequences later. You don't have to feel the need of giving a consequence right that second. Okay, that was a lot of stuff. Please type anything that struck you that you found interesting. You can name a strategy you'd be willing to try tomorrow and why, or just make any comments that you want about what you've learned so far. And then we're almost about done here. So I'll give about 2 minutes for typing time, and then we will kind of finish up. Keeping you guys afterwards. The last part here, this thing is gold, okay? So if you can go to this website, it's called www.smartclassroommanagement.com. This is written by Michael Linson. He's the author of Dream Class and Classroom Management Secret. He's also written a couple other books on classroom management. Let me share my desktop with you here. Will, is that showing up for everybody?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so you go to smartclassroommanagement.com. If you go at the kind of on the top right, or kind of the right side here, everybody, you can see this, click here and join 110,000 subscribers. If you do click on this after the webinar is over, you can sign up for the weekly updates of when a new blog post is posted. So he does a blog post every single week, and you can see some of the topics here. Okay, this week's topic was when to enforce a consequence and when to just redo the routine. So the cool part about this stuff is it takes only about 5 minutes to read. There's your whole article, and almost 95% of the time it's something that you can put into your practice the next day. Okay, and then he has links to old articles that you can click on. So all these different links of when you can go back to this one's from even 2009. They're all relevant. He's got his banner of books over here that you can check out. He even has a management plan for high school that you can download. He has a management plan for recess for principals that you can download. Popular articles, and then his archive is separated into categories. So you can check out all this different stuff from attentiveness all the way how to handle timeout and things like that. So, and then there's really good things here in the responses to each article, because then you get to learn a lot about what other teachers do or what other things they're struggling with. And it's just a lot of really good stuff. So I could not highly recommend any more than to join that email list, so you get that email alert of when there's a new blog post so that you don't forget to check it. And then actually taking the 5 minutes to read the blog post each week. It has the possibility of transforming your career. It's really that good. So I really want to make sure that you guys know about that there. So please do that if you can. Will, how do I unshare my screen, buddy? Or how do I get back?
Menu at the bottom right.
Okay, and what do I press?
It should say stop sharing.
I don't see.
I can keep
I got it. Okay, I got it. Okay, and then if you have any final thoughts, I'd love to answer them there for you. You guys feel free to go. Just know that next Wednesday I'm doing a second part of the series. I hope you guys can join me. Okay, cool. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there till 8 o'clock. I wasn't certain it was going to go that long. I think the other two are just a tad shorter, if that if that convinces you to join me some more. But hopefully I put out some valuable stuff for you. So thank you very much.